Hello and welcome to the show. I'm back carrying on my career mode on F1 2015. After the Bahrain Grand Prix, I currently lie in second place in the championship, a mere 6 points behind Hamilton, and I was hoping I might be able to claw some more of that gap back as we go to Spain. Now, the Catalonia circuit I know very well. I've driven this track on many a game, spent many laps going around here on Forza and the like. However, I've never actually been traditionally very good on here with a Formula 1 car. I have tended to struggle, despite knowing the layout of the circuit and so on very well. I've never been particularly fast with a Formula 1 car. But this being a different game, I was hoping that I would be able to get some speed out of the Ferrari. This track is also a slightly different one to the circuits that we have driven around before. It certainly felt a lot narrower, a lot more technical than the previous tracks. The tracks we've been going around, on the most part, I mean, okay, Malaysia has a couple of sort of high-speed technical corners, but on the most part they've been, you know, relatively fast, relatively flowing kind of circuits. This one, I mean, okay, we've got a very long straight to start with, then we've kind of got a chicane, and then it gets sort of very technical towards the end of the lap. It was almost a lot more claustrophobic in a Formula 1 car. It's kind of a weird thing to say when you say it out loud, but certainly from driving, it did feel like a much more busy sort of racetrack. And this was the first time that I was running a car. I'd been traditionally running the car with much lower downforces. This was the first time I was running the Ferrari with higher downforce settings, if you like. So yeah, it was interesting to see how the car would fare. One concern that I did have from practice, as we see on this that would go on to be my fastest lap in practice, or right towards the end of practice, was traffic. Being a more technical circuit, if you like, traffic was certainly on a couple of practice runs. I was concerned about having issues with traffic. You can see the train of cars up ahead. I got myself a little bit wrong into the final chicane there. You can take a lot of speed if you get it right. I jumped the curbs a little bit on that one. A 24.0 was an okay lap time. Yeah, I was concerned about having lots of traffic around, because you get a train like that in front of you, it's very hard to overtake them and get past, and can easily ruin runs. As far as the practice results go, Rosberg was in first with a 24.0, followed by my 24.0. Hamilton was there in third. It was all fairly close at the top. Two Williams, again, relatively quick here. Two Red Bulls. I was expecting the Red Bulls to be fast around here, I'll be honest. Alonso was up in 12th, which was the highest we'd seen a McLaren so far this season. Very good drive from him. Into the Q1, again trying to get through on the harder tyres. Figured we should be alright to do that. With the Ferrari, I was pretty sort of confident with the performance of this car. But as we came around towards the end, I did a flying lap. It wasn't amazing. On the first one, this one here was going. I was feeling it was going better. However, this is what I was saying about traffic. Ricardo and Mary up ahead were fighting amongst each other as we come up towards this final chicane. This bit here is really not a particularly overtaking spot here. I sort of try to get myself into a position where I can get up the inside of the man. I can't quite do it, and then I have so much speed, so much more speed than I was expecting on the man, and tag the back of it, and that promptly puts me in the wall, and that was... yeah, that was my session over. It didn't actually matter, despite the fact that my first lap wasn't amazing. It was still more than enough to get me through in fifth. Rosberg and Vettel both made it through with the prime tyres as well. And yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised that despite that, my opening gambit with those tyres wasn't particularly fantastic. I was pretty sort of there or thereabouts, which was good to see. Both of the McLarens made it out of Q1 as well for the first time. Kvyat continues a terrible season. He's down in 16th. Grosjean, who's been doing really well, was in 18th. Don't know what was going on with his Lotus. Come to Q2 and again made it through relatively safely in third place. Again, all pretty close to the top. Hamilton's gone fastest sort of overall with a 23.6. Further down, the McLaren of Button would go out. Impressively though, Maldonado would would make it through in 7th place. So after the sort of Maldonado had a terrible season in this game, he would massively outqualify Grosjean around here. So into the final round of qualifying. I knew if I wanted to get poled, I was going to have to do a 23, and I did on my first set of tyres. I did a 23.7. That wasn't enough though. I had seen the Mercedes, well, you saw Hamilton's do a 23.6. This was sort of around, it was there or thereabouts, but yeah, I was having to go again to try and beat Rosberg. But I was glad to see that at the moment it was Rosberg that was leading the way. Again, in the championship, I'm worrying about Hamilton at the moment. I've got to try and start gaining points on him after the terrible mistakes of Malaysia. So yeah, I was pleased to see that at this stage my main rival was Rosberg's Mercedes. This lap though, things were going much better. This hairpin, very easy to outbrake yourself. It took me quite a few times on the practice. I was trying to push it just a little bit too much on the brakes there. This time though, getting it just right. In these corners, I'm used to taking them in sort of, you know, your B-class cars on Forza, and suddenly going up to this that has so much more grip is always a little bit interesting. Again, attack the curbs as much as you can before the game shouts at you, and get as nice a run as you can around this final corner, flat out as we head up towards the line. And it would be my best lap that I would record of this circuit, a 23.4. A couple of tenths quicker than what I'd seen the Mercedes do, and I wasn't going to be going any faster, and none of the Mercedes improved. I was pretty pleased with that lap. Yeah, it gives me sort of 0.3 of a second over the cars behind. Not too bad. Unfortunately, for me at least, Hamilton would get himself into 3rd, with Vettel in 4th, ahead of the 2 Williams. Toro Rossos were doing quite well here. The Red Bulls had, I expected, being, you know, a much more downforce circuit, expected the Red Bulls to do better. They didn't, but the Toro Rossos were doing pretty well. Maldonado would start from 10th, though, which is by far his best qualifying of this season. On to race day, and I was half expecting rain after such a dreary start that we had to this, but it was bright sunshine at the Catalonia circuit. My big concern, of course, was the start. I've been having many issues with getting these cars. I did a relatively good job in Australia. I did well at Malaysia when it was raining. In the dry, I've just not quite sort of got it all hooked up, and that was a little bit of a concern as we go to get away. Last time I sort of bogged down a little bit. This time it was just too much wheel spin. Trying to get on. Like, the very initial launch was okay. I kind of floored it a bit too soon in 2nd gear. We got all manner of wheel spin. 2 Mercedes got past. Bottas was trying. Oh, sorry, I think it was Massa. I'm not sure. One of the Williams tried to get around the outside. I think it might have been Bottas. Either way, he couldn't make it stick this time around. I did keep the position against Hamilton. Keeping myself in the middle there did actually work out quite well. Unfortunately, of course, Rosberg did now have the lead. At this stage, I wasn't terribly displeased with this outcome. It could have gone better, but I was glad to see that it was Rosberg ahead of me rather than Hamilton. I could deal with that. I mean, there's always the concern that now we've suddenly got a big, fat, heavy car with fuel, and you certainly do notice it as I run a little bit wide across the grass. Get away with that one. Could have gone a lot worse. Yeah, when you sort of stick all of the fuel on the car, having been driving this in practice with very low fuel and qualifying with low fuel and so on, always worried that it may cause some problems for the Ferraris, that the Mercedes may just bugger off up the road and never to be seen again like they have done in some of the races. I could probably hold them off behind me, but catching up to them could have potentially been more difficult, but that wasn't the case here. This pleased me greatly, as by the time we came around on lap 2, even if I did get it a little bit scary on that particular corner, I pulled a pretty decent-sized gap back to Hamilton, and Rosberg really wasn't getting away at all. And this, yeah, I was glad to see this. Certainly the middle sector was not a particularly good one for me. I did struggle a little bit through there. Catalonia is a relatively tough place to overtake. You only really get two decent overtaking spots on this circuit. Turn 1, is not the easiest place to overtake, but it is probably the best that you are going to get. Where I was getting speed was through the chicane and out of this final turn, so I was hoping I could sit in the slipstream of the Mercedes and get to the inside at turn 1. We get a lovely tow all the way down the straight. I've got my vehicle to the inside. Rosberg thinks about trying to fight back, because if you can keep it around the outside of turn 1 there, you'll be on the inside for the second part, and then it kind of, yeah, you can really make a nuisance of yourself. I was far enough ahead though that I could sort of, yeah, block the Mercedes off, and I would now find myself in the lead, and we'd got like a 1.5 gap back to Hamilton, which was really quite nice. No, we didn't kind of slow each other down too much, or I certainly didn't slow down too much, having to get the pass done and so on. Which was, yeah, that was very useful, and I was hoping, having had decent pace, that I could pull away from the Mercedes. The problem was the DRS. While over the course of the lap I was slightly quicker, the second we got to the start-finish straight, then we have that Mercedes straight-line speed that get the DRS. This time Rosberg having a look around the outside of turn 1. He couldn't quite keep it there. Hamilton has managed to rejoin us. Hamilton picked up the pace massively on sort of like lap 3 to catch up to the back of us. And the second that they get within the DRS range, then they can just keep up over the course. They can keep just close enough that I couldn't break the toe through the course of the lap, and then they'd make up all the time down the straight. And there wasn't a huge amount I could do about it. I was trying to drive away as fast as I could through here. Again, we see both the Mercedes are having a little bit of a wiggle out of that corner. I could keep myself ahead, so I wasn't having to defend through these corners. I was never really under a huge amount of pressure anywhere else. The second DRS zone down here, this is your other good overtaking spot into the hairpin, but it's not a particularly long DRS zone, and the Mercedes weren't close enough to really try anything in here. It's also, it's a little bit of a tougher corner to get an overtake done. Again, if you are stuck on the outside, you can keep it there, then you're inside all the way through here. So yeah, it's not the easiest place to get overtakes done around here, and then there's nothing that you can do in this final section. Not realistically. You have to really rely on the car ahead making a big mistake if you're going to get something done here, or you've really got to aggressively force the point. And you can see, over the course of this lap, I've got a decent gap back to the two Mercedes. And if we didn't have DRS down here, they probably would struggle a little bit to be keeping up with me. But sure enough, hit the DRS open. Rosberg's around the outside. He doesn't quite... There's just a Ferrari-sized gap there. It doesn't quite get across enough, and I can stick my car there, and I will retake the lead very, very quickly. And that's pretty much what I had to do. I had to defend at turn 1. Everywhere else, I was just fractionally quicker than them. It certainly wasn't by a large amount, otherwise they wouldn't have been threatening. But yeah, everywhere else I was quick enough not to ever have to really worry about defending from them. It was just the that straight line speed of the Mercedes in the DRS that would close up to us. And as this kind of went on for a while, again, very similar story a couple of laps later. This time Rosberg kept it further alongside, still couldn't quite do it. As I braved it, got a big slide, that could have ended in utter disaster. I got a big slide over the curbs and sort of wiggled my way back across the track. I was so lucky I was far enough ahead of the Mercedes. Otherwise, yeah, I would have gone round and Rosberg would have broken his nose. But as this race was going on, 4th and 5th, Vettel and I believe it was Bottas, caught us as well. So there's just this 5-car train going around at the front. The Mercedes couldn't get past my Ferrari, and yeah, everybody was in the DRS down the straights, and yeah, we're keeping up. But now it's also coming to the pit stops. I had actually been concerned about tyre wear around this circuit. Certainly in the qualifying runs, it was two lap runs for me. After that, the tyres were starting to hurt a little bit. So there was concerns that the tyres weren't going to last. They were doing pretty well though. I thought I was going to have to perhaps come in a lap early compared to the AIs around me, but yeah, the car felt good, so I decided I was going to stay out for longer. I didn't really want to sort of be in the melee in the pit stop. Also, I wanted to give Vettel a chance not to get compromised by me, so he could potentially beat Hamilton. As Hamilton was going to be compromised, Hamilton was going to have to stack behind Rosberg because their pit calls are slightly dodgy. And I was hoping, yeah, I could give Vettel a chance to get another car ahead of Hamilton's Mercedes. Bottas joined me in not coming in the pits. I was just checking the tyre. I mean, the tyres were pretty damaged, but the car was actually driving really well. It's yeah, it fared really well around here on the damaged tyres. Then it was my turn to pit next lap. Bottas, of course, following me. Ericsson was up into third momentarily in in this race. I think that's the highest we've seen one of the non-main teams, if you like, in this. There hasn't really been any massively surprising results so far this season. Very quick pit stop from the Ferrari crew. Now, I was concerned, of course, leaving it a lap later. The cars that came in before me can get on some fresh tyres, get out, and theoretically can do a faster lap on their lovely new tyres. However, that hadn't happened. The downside of pitting with that group of cars is they can often get in a little bit of a tangle in the pit lane, sort of having to wait to be released and so on as other vehicles are going past. Whatever the reason, me and Bottas made huge ground here. Bottas came out in second. As we came into the pit stops, he was in 5th or 6th or something. I think it was 5th. And yeah, came out in second. Admittedly, Rosberg and Vettel were right behind him when he did come out. But yeah, I made up huge time in the pit stops and had a very, very sizable gap back. It wouldn't take long for Rosberg to get past Bottas, but I got a 5-second lead over them. Curious sight on lap 11 as Perez came out of the pits. Didn't quite expect me to... I wanted to get past these cars relatively quickly. Yeah, I don't know what quite at this stage what happened to the Force India. I saw a gap and kind of went for it. Did end up over the curve. I was expecting them to dive out of the way a little bit more perhaps than they were wanting to. Either way, I got my vehicle past. There was also a Manor that came out of the pits at a similar point that would kind of help me. The two cars that were a lap down, Rosberg would have more issues getting past the lap traffic than I did. He would get past them, but yeah, it cost him a little bit more time. So I had quite a lonely race at the front. Even when he was passed, I was still pulling away from the Mercedes. My car was working really, really well on these prime tyres. The only real thing that I did in the final few laps was go around the outside of a Manor. That was it for me in these final laps. After such an eventful opening stint, the second half of the race was a fairly straightforward drive. Don't make any silly mistakes with the car, and that was about it. I'll get the gap out back to almost 10 seconds. Certainly helped a little bit by lap traffic. Did slow down Rosberg and the group of cars slightly, but as I said, even when they were out of the traffic, they weren't catching me at all. So I would go on to take a third victory of the season, and yeah, it was a much needed one in terms of the championship. And even better news for me was that Hamilton wasn't on the podium again. It was a Ferrari podium, this one. Also, there were scratches on the front of my car, and I'm not quite sure where I got them from because I don't remember bumping into anything. So yeah, some scratches on the front of my Ferrari, but yeah, a successful race yet again for me here. A very eventful start. The Mercedes, with their blooming straight line speed and DRS, caused me a few issues, but again, never massive problems here. I was surprised by the pace I had really around this Catalonia circuit. The most impressive result, though, perhaps of the day, Alonso in his McLaren would get to 7th. The first points for the McLaren. That's a pretty damn good finish for him there. The Red Bulls do much better in the race than in qualifying. Ricciardo in 8th and Kvyat in 10th. They have abysmal qualifyings, but yeah, this fared much better in the race. Hamilton, I was hoping Bottas could stay ahead of him, but no, the Williams was no match for the Mercedes. Hamilton would end up in 4th. Grosjean didn't like Catalonia very much, would end up down in 15th. Neither would Verstappen in 16th. The curious thing for me, though, I did want to go find out what on earth happened to Perez. As you can see, he's also got a 5-second penalty. I assumed that he must have been involved with a crash at some point, so I went through the replay to have a look. The first thing that I did notice, though, before we get on to what happened to him, there was this huge train that went on for about 2 laps of just all of the midfield cars were here. I'm not quite sure who was leading the train, but just all of them. This train circulated the track for a good 2 laps. Everybody was just sort of sat in the DRS of each other. I assume it was a Mercedes engine car at the front of this group. Yeah, they all just sat following each other around like this, and nobody could ever get close enough to do an overtake. On this particular lap that I filmed, I think a few cars dived into the pit. For Perez, who he stayed out a lap longer than some of the cars ahead of him, came into pits. When he was leaving, it was a Red Bull trying to get past a Lotus, and well, 3 cars into one place didn't quite work. Perez kind of tried to move over, following sort of the normal line the cars want to take, and yeah, there were cars in the way, and that put him round, and the Manor drove into the side of him. That's why these cars got lapped a lot earlier, as they had to come in for repairs, and then Perez had a quick check to make sure his steering was working. No idea what's going on with the car there, but apparently the steering was fine. To the championship standings, and I take the lead for the first time since Australia, and actually get quite a healthy little margin back to Hamilton. 7 points I lead the way by, and Rosberg is closing in on his teammate after a couple of good results for him. Yeah, the Mercedes are relatively close. Vettel still lies in 4th, ahead of both of the Williams. Grosjean slips back a little bit after having a very poor Spanish Grand Prix, while Ricciardo sits in 8th. Alonso, scoring his first points, gets himself up into 11th place, overtakes Kvyat. Kvyat has not had a good season whatsoever here, and further down, Maldonado, despite much better qualifying, still hasn't got any points. To the Constructors' Championship, no changes for anybody, although Ferrari, we are gradually closing on the Mercedes. We really need one of the Mercs to have a duff day if we're really going to make up any ground. Yeah, it's close, but we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to catch them. Anyway, quite a successful Spanish Grand Prix for me. I will certainly take it, taking the lead back. Did better, had a lot more pace than I expected around here. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.